So let's start. Welcome everyone. I would ask everyone to mute their microphones so that we can start. Today is the third day of our module of Heart and Soul of Leadership. And we had beautiful 2 days already with Sister Lynn Level. We've looked at many, many things. Living in the present with purpose was the formation yesterday, and we just read some of the echoes that stayed with us. And I think it was really helpful for all of us, including the exercise at the end, that time of silence where we were able to get in touch, to slow down and get in touch with ourselves and allow that deeper motivation to emerge, that sometimes it's drowned in the midst of so many things we have to do. So today, again, Sister Lynn, thank you so much for being with us. And I know that today you'll be speaking about emotional awareness, and learning to respond rather than to react. Thank you so much for having led us these days with your experience, with your wisdom, with your tone of voice, with your peace, with your authority, bringing as well your consecrated life, your leadership experience. And I hand it over to you again. Thank you, Lynn.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Good to see you again.
La traductora de español se la meme que ayer, o sea, se ve que no es nada.
Espera. We wait.
Okay.
Marilu. Ok, sí, estamos aquí. Sí, te siento. Ok, fantástico. Sí, ok. So, todo está bien, la traductora de español está traduciendo. Si no escuchas, alguien no escucha, debe ver si no está. Lynn, sorry, over to you.
No problem. So, our subtitle of this is Being Your Best Self. And so in order for us, me, you, to be our best selves, we really do need to attend to our emotional life, because it's such an integral part of what it means to be human, and often can be the source of living fully, living freely, living lovingly, or they can get in the way if we don't know and understand our emotional life. Most likely because we don't have a lot of experience here in the sense of having learned to use the power of our emotions. And sometimes we have been impacted by inappropriate expression of emotion and may have been even traumatized by the inappropriate expression. So let us kind of begin with some of the basics, and then we will move through some of the difficult feelings that come by relational life, which is what we're called to. And then, of course, trying to be better at responding than reacting. So when we talk about emotional awareness, we're really talking about what it feels like to live our life. And it's ever changing, our emotional experience. At least it is, unless we're stuck in a particular emotion, overwhelmed by sadness, for example, or reactivity, being angry a lot of the time. And so really, we're really talking about being in touch with your ever-changing emotional experience, and to manage, to understand, to feel, to understand, to express your emotions in the healthiest way possible, and to see how our emotional life is integral to our relational life. And so we want to get better. We want to be emotionally intelligent and be better to use our feelings as a way of connecting, not separating. So, and also it allows us, when we're emotionally aware, to understand what other people feel, and the capacity to empathize. And remember, we've been talking about empathy, which we need to continually understand is, I want to know how she walks in her shoes. And one of the critical understandings of understanding how she walks in her shoes is to understand what's happening to her emotionally. So you really want to be able to handle your own emotions, be able to walk with the emotions of others, and to not feel overwhelmed. So when we talk about why do we talk about emotional awareness? What does it help us? And I gave you a little list there that you can read along with the handout. It helps us recognize who we are. Part of our identity is our emotional life. And so it helps you to understand what you like. I'm really happy when the sisters are gathered and we're enjoying a celebration. So happy with celebration, that kind of thing. It helps us to recognize what we don't like, what's difficult in life, what's challenging, and also can help you to recognize what you need. Empathizing with others, understanding others, being able to communicate clearly and effectively, not having your emotions overtake clear communication, and also being able to express your emotional life. Sisters, you model life for your sisters. If you can talk about an emotional response, if you can talk about your own sadness, about some of the letting go that's happening, it's a terrific model for your sisters to be able to talk about sadness, about letting go. Make decisions uh, based on things important to you, and feelings help us connect with other people. We don't want to just be women who live in our head, but we really want to be able to be empathic and have that part of our decision making. Helps us motivate ourselves. If we're frustrated, we can get motivated to do something differently, for example. Um, Building strong and healthy, rewarding relationships, sisters, which is at the heart of our communal life. We've spent a lot of time learning how to do and do for others. It's now time to increase our relational life with one another. And we can do that if we understand our emotional life in a better way. And finally, you bring life into balance. It's a balance of thinking and feeling and thinking. It's not either or. And by the way, I just like a little comment. When you start doing either or kinds of behavior or kinds of thinking, it's either this or this. That's most likely not true. And so we really want to do a both and. So think about how many times you use the word or, and how you might be setting up a dichotomy that isn't helpful. It's usually and, it's feelings and thinking and feelings. So right now it's just a short comment about in the field of psychology and mental health. We used to focus on behavior, and then we moved to what do people think and how thinking really impacts their life. And now we're understanding that emotions are at the heart of theories and researching, and especially understanding early development. And what I mean by that is, sisters, some of the things that happened in your early life, and listen carefully, something that didn't happen can have lasting impact. And one of the things that may not have happened is emotional closeness with one of your parent who was the major caregiver. Sometimes our mothers were emotionally distant and we're not judging, we're simply saying that was factual. Or sometimes we saw an expression of emotion that was out of control, and we felt overwhelmed. So sisters, when we talk about early life, we talk about what happened, and that can be good or not so good, and what didn't happen. The lack of something has a direct impact on people's adult life and their emotional life. So emotions are front and center also in spiritual direction. Many of us have been influenced by Ignatian spirituality, and Ignatius clearly understood the role of emotions. And so we really don't want to have our spiritual life disconnected from our emotional life. God is in our feelings as well as in what we think. And finally, I think what we're really called to do is to shift back and forth as the environment changes. And that's the key to adaptation and flexibility and resilience. For example, if you're really feeling quite sad about the death of one of your sisters, and in particular, it was a sadness for you because of a personal relationship with her, and then it's time to celebrate Jubilee of other sisters. Sisters, we have to take our sadness and hold it and put it to the side in order to be and celebrate and smile. It doesn't mean we've stopped grieving, but what this is basically saying is we are able to adapt and to shift our feelings, not to be overwhelmed by one particular feeling. The other thing I would say is we really have learned a not so good habit when we say things like, she made me angry. She's causing my frustration. My sadness is because she didn't speak to me. No, people do behave in ways about which we respond with emotion, but your feelings are yours. Nobody causes your feelings. Because you're a relational woman, you interact with others and feel things, but they belong to you. So let us be mindful of, in a sense, blaming another for what we feel. So I'd like to talk about really what we've learned to do with feelings, which is not helpful. And that's, so we're going to talk about, you don't want to keep doing this if you learned some of this. So I really want to say that feelings can be frightening, overwhelming, especially if you lived with someone who managed emotions poorly. If one of your parents or whoever your caregiver was explosive, that no matter what was happening, they responded in anger. So we really want to be able to, I got a little message to slow down, so I will try to do that. And so really what we're talking about is, what was your past experience with emotions and what did it teach you? And so some of us are afraid of emotions, especially if the emotion is a bit more intense. You see, there's intensity of emotions. Sometimes we feel it a little, sometimes we feel it more intensely. And so, sisters, it's really a challenge if your past experience, you felt overwhelmed by any feelings. Sadness, the sadness took over your caregiver's life, so they became depressed, and you don't know what to do with sadness now. Anger can be another one. So fear and helplessness could result because your experience was overwhelming. And so one of the ways we understand trauma today is any experience about which you felt overwhelmed. Unfortunately, for us, sometimes we were overwhelmed in our early and past life because of how people expressed their emotions. Too much, or perhaps too little. And so what we see for some of us, when feelings are involved, especially if they increase in intensity, we begin to freeze or we act out. For example, it's not uncommon for some of us, when we experience a deeper level of sadness, it's scary, so we get angry and push the sadness away, when really we need to stay with the intensity of the sadness, because the intensity of the sadness is telling you how much you loved. the intensity of the sadness, the loss, is telling you how much you loved. We don't want to push it away. We don't want to turn it into anger. And sometimes we shut down. So we talk about 3 responses to being overwhelmed, which I'll talk about again. We freeze. We don't know what to do. We act out, especially we get angry, or we shut down. We kind of just withdraw. And so when we do those things, we're really not living in the present moment. And we might say or do things that are not helpful. And it's related, sisters, to our earlier learning about emotions and emotional expression. Another response, now notice I'm talking about ways we've learned to deal with emotions. Another response, perhaps not for you, but for our sisters, can be what we call compulsive, addictive, inappropriate behaviors. So if you don't feel that you can handle the emotions, one thing to do is to avoid, control, or numb them by a substance, alcohol, sugar, food, or sometimes by a behavior, spending a lot of time watching television, spending a lot of time playing games on your computer. So these can be ways of kind of removing ourselves from our emotional life, which are not helpful. And then finally, distracting ourselves so we can numb by addictive and inappropriate behavior. That includes substances or processes, or we can distract ourselves. Now, let me say, distracting oneself can be a very good coping mechanism at times. But here we're talking about distracting ourselves from our emotional life, and we do it by ruminating, obsessive thinking, going over and over and over and over again. And that's what some of our sisters do. And that's why it's hard to connect with them. Or you escape into fantasy. You might be reading a bunch of novels where that you can kind of live another life. Novels are wonderful. They teach us about relationships. They can teach us about relationships, or we can escape. Also, we want to talk about the mindless entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with a good movie or TV, but if that's how you're distracting yourself from your emotional life, it doesn't help. In addition, I think sticking with one emotional response that feels comfortable, no matter what the situation is again, avoiding the richness of your emotional life. Certainly, being an angry woman is not helpful. So if your response to most things covers your emotional life, by anger being the feeling that you experience most and always, is not helpful. Nothing wrong with anger unless you're an angry woman. It's your response to everything. Also, I think we have to pay attention to the person who always makes light of something, the person who jokes about everything. Again, there are difficult situations that you face as a leader, and to have your almost typical response to make light of it. Oh, things will get better. Everything is going to be fine, is not always helpful. Sometimes it's good to have some humor. We talked about it yesterday, but this is to make light of when we really need to pay attention to the seriousness of something. So those are who we learn to be. Now, how do we want to move forward? One thing is to understand that the same feeling can be both helpful and not helpful if how we engage feelings. And the three I'm using as an example are anger, sadness, and fear. Anger can be deadly if you are out of control with your anger, you are unable to relate with others, that your response is always anger. It's really not helpful in a relational life with others, and it can impact you physically, emotionally, and spiritually if you are an angry woman. Also, anger can protect and save lives. So if something is in real danger, if you're in real danger, you want to be angry to move into that self-protective mode. Having a conversation with a difficult conversation with a sister, you don't want to interpret that as danger always. Sadness can lead to depression if it's unexpressed. And sisters, that's an important understanding. We have much to be sadness about right now. A lot of losses, a lot of letting go, not just in our congregations, but in the world around us. War, poverty, children starving, tremendous amount of loss happening around us. And so sadness can call us to slow down, surrender to what we're experiencing emotionally, pay attention, honor what you're feeling. Or it can lead us to shoving down the emotion and becoming depressed because we don't express. And finally, fear. It can be debilitating. We talked yesterday about courage and not letting fear take over. But fear, if you've learned to be afraid, if fear was accompanied you in your early life, then situations that appear dangerous or unsafe today can lead you to fear, which can be overwhelming. And so overwhelming fear is a barrier to making decisions today and taking the risks today that we are called to as women religious, living the gospel. Fear also can support your life by signaling danger and saying to you, you need to do something here to preserve or save your life. And sometimes that can happen in an interaction with another person. It isn't always death dealing. So what are some of the common emotions that you might experience in relating with others? What we're trying to say here is living life, living a relational life, which is at the heart of our communal life. You're going to experience different emotions. And so what I'm trying to suggest here is if these are a part of your life, you want to understand them, see them as not bad. And let me make a little parenthesis here. There's no such thing as a negative feeling. So we need to change our language. There's no such thing as a negative feeling. It's true, some feelings are more difficult for us to engage with. Absolutely. Difficult, challenging, not negative. So if we can clear that one up, that can be very helpful. So when we talk about in relating with others, especially when you are in a leadership role, in a power position, stressful emotions are all too common, or difficult emotions. They become even more common when you face major changes. And that's our life today, sisters, facing major changes and the invitation to transformation. It's not just about making a change to correct the past. It's about seeing and being called into a new life, which is the transformative journey. It's important for leaders to manage your emotions more so now with the chaos and the anxiety that exists. So I'd like to talk about some of the common challenging, notice I didn't say negative, emotions that we face. So let's talk about frustration or irritation. Now, I'm sure in your leadership, you have not experienced any frustration or irritation. Am I right? This is for somebody else. So let's look at frustration. What is the feeling trying to tell you? When you feel frustrated, it's you feel stuck or trapped, unable to move forward in some way. Now, that may be accurate, or it may be the way you're looking at the situation, but frustration and irritation are pretty typical, normal feelings in a relational life with others. Notice it is also important that you might feel stuck or blocked and why you might feel stuck or blocked. And that's important because sometimes we get ourselves in a place that is because of the way we're framing the situation. So it's important to understand that frustration can lead to a different kind of feeling. In particular, it can lead to anger, which becomes more challenging to deal with. And so how do you deal with frustration and irritation when it's at that level? So here's some suggestions. One of the best things you can do is stop yourself, slow down, and look at the situation and how you feel. She doesn't make you frustrated. She's not the cause. You're irritated because, but you don't want to be blaming. Ask yourself, why do you feel frustrated? Write it down. Be specific. Then, to help you move forward, you might want to think about one positive thing about the current situation. Let's say a sister, you've agreed to meet one of your sisters, and she's late, and she doesn't call, and you're waiting, and you have made time for her in a very busy schedule, and she doesn't show up, and you hear nothing from her. And then eventually she shows up and expects you to give her all your time and attention, and you're irritated or frustrated. One thing you could do is to say to yourself, I have more time to prepare for the meeting that I'll have later today with her being late. Or you can sit and stew about why isn't she here and she doesn't respect my time, and let the frustration and irritation take over. So finding something positive about the situation can help you to live in the moment, use your energy in a more productive way, and help you to think about things in a different way so that when she does arrive, you're not going to be blowing her out of the room with your tone of voice and your reaction, you're reacting to her. Feelings of frustration and irritation that you support, that you keep revving up, do not solve the problem, which means they're really not anything helpful. Now, it doesn't mean for a sister who's coming late that you wouldn't say to her, it was my understanding we were meeting at 10 o'clock. What happened? So you can gather information about what happened and really understand her life better, but not if you come at her with frustration and irritation. Nobody ever gets frustrated, right? How about worry, nervousness, and anxiety? When we're talking about a time of great change, great upheaval, things happening every day, as in the news this morning with a bombing in the Middle East, things happening in the US, which are very challenging to our democracy. So they're really fear and letting fear take over. Remember, the message of fear is, I am not safe. Fear is about safety. Anxiety is about, I will not be safe, future fear. And so I think it's with change and the complexity of issues, to experience some fear, some sense of not being safe is pretty understandable, isn't it? However, you don't want to get that out of control in your life. And by the way, that's what worry is. I'd like you to really pay attention. Does anybody here, you raise your hand. Do you worry at all? Anybody here worry? Yeah. Well, let me tell you what worry is. Worry is an act of your imagination that things are not likely to go well. Worry, an act of your imagination that things are likely not to go well. It's really your attempt at controlling a situation that you are likely not able to control. And so, sisters, you don't want to see there's something wrong with you if you are living with worry and anxiety. They're part of this life now. You just don't want to feed the worry by letting your imagination keep going. And also, you really want to be able to understand that worry changes nothing, that you are dealing with a complex situation, and you are being asked to take some risks at this time. But we talked yesterday about calculated risking. You're not gambling with your life. You're using logic and reason. And so if you find you're letting worry get out of control, then you have to be able to say, you have to put up a stop sign and say, stop, stop. You want to understand your worry. You want to understand it's trying to control something. And you want to be able to, as it says here, stop, make time, slow down, and understand what is happening and how you're contributing, not helping yourself by engaging in excessive worry. I think it's really helpful to not surround yourself by people who worry as well. So hopefully as a team, you can help each other and not increase each other's worrying. I talk about deep breathing exercises to slow down. Sisters, worry comes right out of our nervous system. It's not just in your head, your whole body is responding. And so we understand that breathing, slowing down, slowing your breathing, slowing your heart rate, focusing on your breathing and nothing else can be very helpful here. We cannot continue to ignore our bodies and try to live with the kind of complexity that we're living with. Another suggestion, in addition to breathing, slowing down, breathing in and breathing out, just stopping and breathing. It's important to say, how could I improve this situation? How can we think creatively about other possibilities? And you could do that on your leadership team. You don't have to live with, this is it. There's nothing we can do here. And then sometimes if you tend to worry a lot, some of us do, we learn to worry, maybe because your mother worried. You know, we capture what we kind of model, you know, significant people in our life. So if you find that worries are churning around inside you, you might want to write them down, have a little worry log. And then you can say, I'm going to write down, I'm worried about this. And later today, I'm going to come back and give myself a little free time to look at that. And the other thing I would say is why we want to not let worry take over. It can really impact your self-confidence. So if you spend a lot of time on worry, you begin to doubt your ability to be a leader. So we need to not ignore worry. We're not going to pretend it doesn't exist. Fear, anxiety, worry. You just don't want to spend your life worrying. So that's why sometimes we need to put it in that little logbook. And a lot of times when you go back and look at it, you'll see it was not quite as bad as you thought, what you were worried about. A big one for women is anger, aggravation. I think all of us at times have lived with or experienced out of control anger. And does that cause fear? For sure. For sure. It's an emotion that most of us don't handle well. And one of the reasons we don't handle anger well is we learned it's not good. To be angry is not a good thing. So we have to take anger out of the negative pile. It's not negative. What you do with anger can be negatively impacting you and others. And so really looking at your angry experiences. Who are the significant people in your life and how did they handle anger? How did your mother handle anger? How did your father handle anger? You know, I can be just very forthcoming. My father he would raise his voice and sometimes, you know, not listen. My mother would withdraw. So what did I learn? I kind of learned both ends of the spectrum. Don't talk about it, withdraw, and raise your voice. So it's so important to, you know, who did I learn to be? And being able to manage your anger, which is a healthy emotion. And it is something that can help you to be successful in working with others. it's your anger. She didn't make you angry. And you need to be able to stop and understand where the anger is, why you're triggered to anger, what you learned about anger, and how to learn to be able to express anger in a healthy way. I think it's important to watch for the early signs of anger. So you can understand it might start with aggravation or irritation, and you stop there before you let it increase and kind of blow up, and you react. Often, when we react to a situation, anger is involved for many of us. What triggers anger in you? Someone being late, someone not being honest, you're feeling not respected. These are all things that may be happening. And you want to be able to realize, oh, when that happens, I go to anger. And you want to be able to have perhaps a better response to some of those difficult situations. I think if you feel yourself, the anger coming up, you can stop. And sisters, if you're not hearing, if you hear one thing from me over and over, stop, slow down. You have everything to say about your life, including your feelings and your response to other people. Close your eyes, practice deep breathing, interrupt the anger becoming excessive, and ask yourself, who do I want to be here with this sister, with this situation? I think sometimes you picture yourself as angry. You can imagine what you look like sometimes, especially remember what the people in your life who were out of control, and you say, do I really want to look like that? Would I want to work with somebody like that? So sometimes we have to kind of just say, oops, wait a minute. I have a different choice here. So, and sometimes it's very important that you express anger directly, not aggressively or passively. And this could be a whole talk. So how do you express anger directly? Well, you watch your tone of voice and you watch your nonverbal behavior. You're not, your face is not full of anger. Your body is not, you're not like this, your body language. And so you come out of a more calm experience and you talk about your anger and why you're angry. And usually underneath anger, there are three possible causes. The first is you believe something is unjust or unfair. You believe something is unjust or unfair. It may not be unjust or unfair, but that's how you see the situation. If you believe something is unjust or unfair, it triggers some form of anger. What you have to do is stop and say, is this really unjust or unfair? A second reason why good people like me and you get angry is you expect something and it doesn't happen. So we talk about unmet expectations. So you expect people to show up on time for meetings. You expect your team members to come to meetings prepared for the topics you're going to discuss. You expect. If it doesn't happen, it can trigger anger. Here's the key, sisters. This is a key thing to understand. You have to ask yourself, are my expectations realistic and reasonable? Are my expectations realistic and reasonable? So, do you expect meetings to always begin on time and that people always come prepared? Is that reasonable and realistic? Notice the word I used. Always come on time, always come prepared. Hmm. The third reason why good women like me and you have feelings of anger is because you feel personally attacked in some way. You feel a personal attack in some way. Now, if somebody was coming at you with a big stick, I would hope that there'd be some anger in your response because you are in danger. Sometimes, however, it's what people say to us. It's not only in danger, excuse me, but you feel personally attacked. But sometimes it's not physical attacking, but our person feels attacked. Our integrity is called into question. Our self-esteem is impacted. For example, someone says to you, you're dishonest, you weren't honest, you didn't give us the information. So those three reasons, you have to ask yourself, is this situation unfair or unjust? Did I expect something that was reasonable and realistic and it didn't happen? Do I feel personally attacked? And sisters, in leadership, you learn one thing, not to personalize some of the things that happen. It's not because you're you. It's because you're in a position of authority, because you're the designated leader, that sometimes people are interacting with you in a way that is not the best. Anger. We could spend a day here. Not a bad feeling. Trying to understand where your anger comes from. And also, if you can understand those are possible sources of anger for you, then they are also possible sources of anger for the person who's angry with you. What about disliking and liking? Do you like some people better than others? Do you like some of your teammates better than others? So liking and disliking. We've all had experience of walking with, accompanying, working with someone that are hard to like for us. We have a hard time liking them. It's okay that you don't like someone. And sometimes you want to explore, why is it? That's always a good question. Regardless, act fairly, Act respectfully, no matter what. Regardless, act fairly and respectfully, no matter what. There's an opportunity for transformation here for them and for you. So be respectful. That I can't say that more. Respectful. It's more than getting along with. It's trying to say, this person is in my life for a reason. If I treat her with respect and courtesy, how will I become a better person? It's also true that you need to speak clearly to the other person. We call it being assertive. If the other person doesn't treat you fairly, that's why you don't like her, you have difficulty, then I think you have to explain to her or ask her to treat you differently, as you would hope that another person would ask you to treat them differently if they felt disrespected. So what about disappointment and unhappiness? I think dealing with your own disappointment and unhappiness can be very difficult, especially when you're in a leadership role and the sisters are looking to you to be the model. If a major disappointment happened in your life, and a major disappointment could be the ending of a friendship, you are not simply a leader. You are a woman who lives a relational life. And so if a relationship, a friendship breaks down, you have to understand that disappointment, unhappiness, and less energy could absolutely be a part of your life. You don't want to let a failure or a difficult relationship and ending take over. And therefore, you don't then entrust yourself to be in relationships again. I think one of the most challenging disappointments that can happen, and I've seen this happen over and over again, is when someone that you considered a friend rejects you because of a decision that you and your leadership is making or has made. Because they don't agree, which can happen, they reject you. What a disappointment. And it can cause you to doubt yourself, to doubt the relationship. So again, when we talk about disappointment and becoming unhappy with a situation or a person, often with a person, it's important to slow down, take a moment, realize that relationships change and grow. They don't always happen the way we'd like them to happen. I often think of that what's the image you have, that life is a straight road ahead? I think you know there's no straight road. There are detours, there are off-ramps and on-ramps, hills and valleys. And each of them offers an opportunity to become our best self. But sisters, they do not happen without suffering. Relational life is difficult and hard work, especially in a leadership group. You have to work at it. And it can also be terribly rewarding. So I think we have to adjust our expectations. Doesn't mean you have to change them all, but sometimes we adjust them, you know. And sometimes we have to take time again to come away, journal. Where's the unhappiness coming from, the frustration, disappointment? Notice I said, is it a coworker? Is it your role, you know? You thought leadership was going to look like this. How many of you thought leadership was going to look like this? And now you're in the role and it looks like this. Am I right? So sometimes the life we're living is not what we thought it was going to be. And that can be disappointing and even create some loneliness. So my final thing here on this is an encouragement to smile. Now, I'm not saying, you know, you're at a funeral and you're grieving the loss of someone and then you're smiling, you know, I'm not saying that, but I do think we need to smile more often, get this part of your face working, because in strange ways, we're wired that in a way that really smiling does help us with our emotional life. So you may want to try it. And then finally, a reminder before we just do a little concluding of this section. Emotions can be challenging, especially in work situations. So now I'm talking about you and your team, your council. And so how do you manage, you personally and collectively manage your emotional life? I've said this before, emotions can be contagious and spread. And so these difficult emotions like anger, frustration, disappointment, you can spread them throughout the congregation. Your emotions are yours. I've said that at least twice. And it's important for you to do a little reflection on how often do you feel certain feelings. If you did a little log, a little journal, what are the 3 feelings you most likely experience? And what are they trying to tell you? It's important to understand that emotions are often related to the past, especially if you felt overwhelmed by how people expressed or did not express. Sometimes children's feelings were not honored. So did you learn to not honor your feelings? Supposing you were really sad and crying about something as a child, and a caregiver said to you, stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. Not very empathic, not understanding how you're walking in your shoes. Most likely, they felt uncomfortable dealing with your sadness and tears. So we're not judging and blaming your caregiver. We're just inviting you to see how you may have learned to not honor your own emotional life. And so, how do you make friends with your emotions? Well, the first thing is remember intense feelings usually go away unless you rev them up, unless you go over and over and over and over. So if it's intense, the sadness, or intense, the disappointment, or intense, even joy, I'm just thrilled with what's happening. Experience the intensity and know that they lessen. It's pretty hard to keep that intensity up unless you obsess. You do this. Core emotions like anger and sadness and fear and frustration, surprise and joy, you want to be able to experience all of those when appropriate. Pay attention to your body. Sometimes you don't realize that you're feeling something and your body is trying to tell you. So if all this is what your body's doing, what's the feeling? If you can't swallow, you feel like, or you can't breathe, you just feel, what is the body trying to tell you about your emotional life at that moment? The body carries a very important message. Do not avoid emotions you don't like. If you distance yourself from some emotions or feelings, you will distance yourself from others as well. It's being with. And don't choose between thinking and feeling. You are a thinker, a rational woman, and you're a feeling woman. You want to include them both. So 3 little things that you can help you in a given moment. 3 questions. What am I feeling? There's the first one. Name your feeling accurately. What am I feeling? Not what did she cause or what is she doing? What am I feeling? Name the feeling as accurately as possible. Discover what the feeling is trying to tell you. Feelings, emotions have a message. And you want to express, the third one, express your feelings appropriately. We're not talking about depressing, shoving down, and we're not talking about pouring your feelings onto somebody else, dumping your feelings on somebody else. That's not very helpful. So what am I feeling? Name it accurately. Discover what feelings are trying to tell you. What's the message? If I'm sad, what's the message? If you're sad, it's about some kind of loss. That's what I mean by what's the message. And the third one, express your feelings appropriately. So what's an appropriate expression of sadness? What's an appropriate expression of disappointment? What's an appropriate expression of happiness or joy? What's an appropriate expression of loneliness? I saw a couple of things pop up in the chat. For me, and you can disagree, it's okay, I'm using the notion of feelings and emotions interchangeably. Somebody said, what's the difference between emotions and feelings? I'm using them interchangeably. There's a slight way of defining those two, but I'm using them interchangeably. Okay, so that I noticed one of the questions that popped up. So let me pause for a moment here and say to you, as I say every day that we've been together, what was good for you to hear? If nothing else, what is one thing that will help you to be the leader you want to be? What is one thing that will help you be the leader that you want to be your best self? Where do you need to do a little bit more work with regard to your emotional life? Where do you need to do more work? And can you understand that what's happening to you emotionally now has a direct relationship to what happened in your past, some of which was good and wonderful, and some of which may have been overwhelming. And what did the good and wonderful teach you? And what did the overwhelming experience teach you? So, Paula, I think we can take a few minutes here to certainly, I think comments are always helpful because you help one another. So it doesn't always have to be a question, but a comment can be helpful. It helps us see we're in this together. And we're not alone. We're not alone. You're not alone, you know. And then secondly, a question is always welcomed. So why don't we see what kind of comments we get either in the chat or with a raised hand for a few minutes here.
Thank you, Lynn, for helping us to get more in touch with our emotions and not to be afraid of them as if they shouldn't be there. So often we think that. So there's some comments. There's also some questions. I'll just read some comments and then we'll go to the questions. So I need to work more about my fear to what others can say, how they can react, fear so that to the things that don't come up as I would like, fear that someone will be annoyed with me, fear that someone will be too tired to not be just, so I need to regulate my fear.
Let me just comment that, you know, how many times did Jesus say, do not be afraid? Fear can be the biggest block to our journey as women, as relational women, as leaders. So getting a look at that, well, that's incredible. So thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you for that. So it's so important and so good to listen to the feelings and to name them. This will help me to feel more light in my relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So this will help me to learn to respond and not to react. We're still going to deepen in that. So to allow myself to feel my emotions without fear. I think that's one of the core messages that you shared. There's some questions on anger. You did touch them, but I would like to repeat them. How can anger be expressed in a healthy way? I'm aware that you've touched that. And then on the same line, is being annoyed a form of anger?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, when we think of anger, it's like a family of emotions, you know. So is annoyed probably and irritated? Is it all part of a bigger family called anger? Most likely. And here's the thing. I think we don't like to use the word anger because we've learned it's not okay. So we use other words. We annoyed, frustrated, you know, because they seem to be a little bit more acceptable. So don't be afraid to name what you feel as anger. It might be anger this big, or it might be anger this big, you know. So intensity is one of the issues here. But it's okay to be angry a little bit, angry a lot. How about being outraged? we need to be outraged. That's anger at sort of the top of the pile, you know. Why? With injustice that is happening in our world or in a particular community. Outrage. So intense feelings of anger are in relationship to what is not happening or what is happening. So we don't want to be afraid of varying intensities of anger. I think expressing anger directly, I think I hinted at that, but certainly you want to, it's your anger. I didn't cause it, you know. I might have done or said something. And so you might say, I'd like to talk to you about what happened at the meeting. Maybe it's one of your co-leaders, somebody on the team. Can we talk about what happened at the meeting? And then you look at behavior that about which you responded with anger. Listen to my language. You look at behavior about which you responded with anger. So I might say, when I made a suggestion at the meeting, I felt you put me down. And I am angry about that. And I want to talk to you about that. So I'm not shouting, I'm not pointing my finger. I've calmed myself down, and I've said to myself, that I felt this, and I felt this because, and I'm going to share with her the behavior that happened in this interaction. I am not going to tell her motivation. I'm angry with you because you don't care about me. And as a result, you treated me unfairly. No, 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 no. Stay away from why you think she put you down or dismissed you or didn't hear your suggestion. You talk about behavior. And by the way, notice you've thought it out, you've reflected. And then the other thing to make expressions of difficulty or anger helpful is you choose a time in private, where the other person agrees, can we meet? I want to talk to you about what happened at the meeting. Can we meet? You mutually agree upon a time to meet, and then you talk as calmly as you can. It doesn't mean there's no emotion, but you talk as and you say, here's what happened, here's how I felt. And then you do one more thing. In the future, I am asking you ask for how you want it to be different. In the future, if you don't like something that I say, can we talk about it without you dismissing me or saying that was stupid or whatever the interaction was that that you had some anger in response. So reflection, trying to name what happened, name the behavior, stay out of why. You have no idea why she dismissed you, why she said what she said, and then you're telling her, here's what I felt, and that impacts our team meeting. And then you ask for what you would like to be different. One last piece. You have to say, help me understand. Listen to this powerful question. Help me understand why you responded to me as you did. So you can't it isn't a one-sided conversation.
Lynn, thank you. Thank you so much. So we spoke about anger, but there's a question on the other side, which I think it's important as well. The sister says, I easily become compassionate with people in vulnerable situations, and that sometimes makes me become emotional and cry. How can I work on this so that I become compassionate, but without being affected in a way that I cannot function? Thank you.
Well, the word compassion, as I understand it, I mean, one definition is to feel with. That's what the word means. Sometimes, depending on the situation, it's to suffer with. That's a deeper understanding of what is happening to this person, that you can feel intensely what is happening. So to have an emotional response, even to have some tears, does not have to take you away from being able to accompany her or to function. You may need to pause for a moment. Again, notice, slow down, take a breath, pay attention. And you might even say, I'm really deeply moved by what you shared. And you might pause. That's real. That's human. It doesn't have to take you out of the situation of how to be helpful to her, including what you might need to be, in order to be helpful, you might need to challenge her. Because there is emotion, sadness, recognition of something is quite difficult. That doesn't mean that ends any kind of a helpful interaction. But you do need to know what's happening with me, that I feel deeply moved, and it doesn't prevent me from moving forward to accompany. That the word accompany means I'm touched. It's you're not a brick, you're not a piece of wood. One last thing. If something touches you deeply, what is it in your own life that you need to look at? Sometimes we're pointing our fingers saying she's really sad and blah, blah, blah. There's 3 fingers coming back here. So is it an invitation to your own journey?
Thank you, Lynn. Do we still have time? Do we tell me?
Yes, maybe one more, a couple comments, and then I do want to, because the reaction piece is not, we're not always our best self. So
Yeah. So there is an interesting question. Let me see. Okay. So could you say something about the jealousy and envy within the leadership team and on the part of the sisters towards us? Thank you.
okay, so understanding jealousy, envy, I'll leave them together. There's a slight difference, but if I'm jealous of you, basically, I want what you have, or I want what I think you have. So there is interpretation here. So let's say, and what's real here, and what might I do about it? Let's say the sisters find another person on the team, they seem to go to her more easily if they have a question or a concern. They seem to go to Sister Mary more easily than to you. And you're jealous. You want what she has. And you might even push her away. You start, separating yourself from Mary. Perhaps a better response is, what is it about Mary that the sisters feel more comfortable going to her than to me? And if there's a pattern, then you have a great opportunity to become more like Mary rather than spending your energy jealous of Mary. Now, sometimes it's a particular skill that a person has that you don't have. And so how can you be grateful that Mary has that skill and she's a part of your leadership group? How can you maybe get better at that skill? And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. You know, you heard me admire Paula for her versatility and the ability to switch between languages. That's not everybody's gift. So if it's a gift, how do you be grateful and honor the gift? And then stop looking at Mary and look at yourself and say, what's the gift that I bring? Why am I here?
Thank you, Liz. So would you like to continue or?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you.
So I've often talked with leaders, and my own personal experience is when we react, we're not our best self. It happens. It happens to good women like me and you. It's not that we're bad, but we're not our best self. So I think when we talk about being a responder, not a reactor, what are we talking about? We're talking about somebody says or does something, and our whole system reacts to, our whole system is upset. That's one way of saying it. And the impulse is to react. And oftentimes it's unconscious. It isn't a thought process. Oh, I didn't like that, therefore I'm going to. It's an automatic, unconscious response in many cases related to who we learn to be. They certainly, reactions are not helpful most of the time. I don't think they are probably any time. Oftentimes they're not kind and compassionate. We've been talking about kindness and compassion. So the tricky part about reacting is it might feel good in the moment. You sort of get it off your chest, you know? I'm glad I said that. It often isn't the most kind or compassionate thing or helpful thing you can do. And so we want to say, what other choices do you have? What other choices? So when we talk about a reaction, as I tried to spell it out for you, and by the way, this is tricky behavior. This is tricky because it's so connected to who we learn to be. So we can slow down. It's your quick, emotional, driven by feelings, less by awareness and thoughtfulness. Automatic, immediate, emotional, most likely influenced by the past. They often are unintended. That's not what you wanted to do. And sometimes they can negatively impact your relational life. A very important understanding right now. Don't miss this. Do not judge reactions. You want to understand them, not judge them. If you put a lot of judgment in there, look how stupid I am, look, I'll never learn, I'm a terrible leader, all of the judgments that it helps nothing. When we talk about a response, more thoughtful, more deliberate, a calmer, higher level maybe of emotional understanding, slowing down, kind of regulating your system, kind of you're going to want to operate out of here, not this up and down and all of it. And responding, which is helpful when you take time, helps you to look at, what do I want to achieve here? What's the outcome I really want? And choosing behavior to get to what you really want. That's not what happens when we react. So this next piece, sisters, you need to understand how science is teaching us how to be relational women. And so we talk about the neuroscience. We're talking about brain now. The brain of reacting versus responding. So we talked the other day about the different parts of our brain. Remember this as your brain? Everybody remember this? And what's this part up here? This is your upstairs brain. And here is the downstairs brain. Remember that? So different parts of the brain are happen in reacting. The more primitive part of the brain, now don't misunderstand primitive as wrong or etc. It's sort of, if you want to think of it's at the heart of the brain. It's here at the center. It's here. The more primitive part of the brain processes emotions and takes charge quickly. How quick does a reaction happen? Right? How quick? All of a sudden, whew. Now, your reaction might mean you get up and leave the room. So we're going to look at reactions happening differently. This part of our brain doesn't consider long-term effects. It focuses on immediate survival. So that's what you need to know. When you come out of here, out of the primitive downstairs brain, you feel threatened. You do not feel that you can survive. Fear, big time. The upstairs brain, that's up here, right here at the top, and by the way, when we look here, it's here. It's at the front of the brain, which we call the cortex. You know, we need to understand language here, cortex. This is where decision-making and a lot of social behavior comes out of our upstairs brain. And this part allows us to look at options, consequences, make choices based on reasoning rather than pure emotion. Now, what you want to be able to do is to use your upstairs brain and your downstairs brain in tandem together. We're not going to throw this away. It's at the heart of our brain because it's what it means to be a human person. So really, we're trying to use all of our brain, upstairs and downstairs. So what are some helps to respond instead of react? To respond thoughtfully rather than to react, which is an impulse. And remember, it's an impulse to be safe. So what do? You pause and you breathe. do not underestimate the power of breathing deeply, because it's touching your central nervous system, which is reacting. Take, even today, if we could just pause for a minute, and you might want to close your eyes. Here's how we have to learn to breathe more deeply. And one way to do that is to do a little counting. And I'm going to talk about 4, 4, and 8. And I'll show you what I mean. You want to breathe in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to hold it within yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you want to breathe out through your mouth like this to the count of 8. So the exhale is much longer than the inhale. So let's try it. Let's try it. I'll count, you breathe. Close your eyes. Through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Notice how we don't get to 8 because we don't breathe deeply enough. And the exhale, that whole process is calming, and we need to do it many times a day, not just when you're in a stressful situation. Certainly reflect before you speak. You know that. This is hardly a recommendation, because you want to achieve something. You want to achieve a relational life. You want to be purposeful. You want to be kind. You want to be compassionate. Learn to listen better. Listen actively, giving your full attention to the other person. Try not to plan what you're going to say. One of the things, I've been a trained listener in my work as a psychologist, and our supervisor, my mentor would say, don't worry about what to say. If you listen, she will tell you what the next thing is you want to say. Trust that that is true. She will give you the clues to what you then can say to her. Listen, listen, and listen. This next piece is really critically important, and it's identifying your own triggers. What is it that you react to? What are the things that are a part of you? They're not about her. We all have specific triggers, situations, words, behaviors that provoke in us an intense emotional reaction, often a physiological reaction, meaning our bodies are responding. It isn't even through the head, it's everything about us. And that's why it comes out of us as a reaction. So I think it's really important as a leader, you say to yourself, what are the situations where I am likely to react? You might want to start with your leadership group. What happens in the leadership group and I find myself reacting? Someone who rushes us through a decision. We got to make a decision. We got sort of forcing a decision before it's time. Do I react to that? Am I the person who forces a decision because I'm anxious, we need to get it over with? So here's the definition of trauma, and it's written in your paper. An experience of being overwhelmed. So what happens or doesn't happen and you feel overwhelmed? You're writing a newsletter to the congregation, and Sister Mary doesn't do her part repeatedly. This is not the first time. This is the fourth time that Sister Mary is not ready with her portion of the newsletter. Boom. Identify the situations. What's the trigger there? Is the trigger lack of cooperation? Is the trigger the newsletter will be late, and being late is a big no-no? If you're aware of the triggers, you can handle them more calmly, and you can choose a better response. You're not going to ignore Mary doesn't do things on time. We're not ignoring that. But reacting is not your best choice. So again, what is a reaction? Strong, emotional, and behavioral, meaning your body is reacting. And here's the key thing. It's as if you are reliving an original, overwhelming experience. So let's talk about a sister comes in to you and she's very angry and she's shouting at you. And you react, and I'm going to talk about possible reactions. You react not by being angry in response, you react by withdrawing. You don't know how, you can't say anything. The original experience of being overwhelmed was in your family, where your father, your mother, your grandmother often was angry and explosive. And in order for you to feel safe then, you withdrew. So when you encounter a trigger, you move to protect yourself automatically. It is not something you think about. And you do something to make yourself feel safe. Your nervous system is constantly evaluating, is there a risk here? Am I unsafe here? It makes judgments, it prioritizes, it adapts. Sisters, the challenge for you and me, absolute challenge, is to realize we are adult women, more capable than that child of 8 or 10, and that we can be safe even in the face of intense anger, for example. So when you encounter a trigger, and I'll give you some examples, your nervous system is activated and it becomes like this. And so you do what you do to feel safe. And basically what we're learning is you fight, you freeze, you withdraw, or for some of us, we make nice. That's a new learning. We just smooth things over to let the danger go away. So we agree when we don't agree. So I love this statement. This is a Dick Schwartz statement. We really want to regulate our system to be able to respond, not react. And so Dick Schwartz, who's a person who works in this, he says, if you can see it, you don't have to be it. So if you can see that a reaction is occurring, you don't have to be that person. And you can move to a more balanced thought and feeling response. So I tried to think of what are some triggers? What are mental triggers? So is achieving your mental picture, getting things done, doing things right? And if somebody interferes with getting things done, do you react? Is control an issue for you? If you worry a lot, control may be underneath. So you really want to find that out. And so, or are emotions triggers? Intense feelings, sadness, anger, depression. Did you live with a depressed mother? Environments can trigger feeling trapped. Nothing I can do here, which may not be true, but that's how you see the situation. And then interpersonal triggers. The way a particular person interacts with you. Maybe she comes at a very rational person, doesn't consider feelings, and you like to have feelings be a part of the journey. It could be somebody on the team who says that doesn't make any sense. And yet, if you consider emotions, it does make sense. So what are the triggers? And when it's time to respond, you want to be able to express what you think and feel by using I statements. I feel upset when versus you make me upset. So you focus on your experience and trying to share your experience with the people you are working with. So I asked some questions and they're written on your little handout. So I'll move a little bit through these, but what I think is on your paper. You want to be able to respond thoughtfully so that you can have more empathy in your, so thought and feelings go together versus an outburst or reaction. So you acknowledge how you feel, identify your feelings, understand that they are yours and why a situation may be impacting you with your emotional response. You have to ask, who do I want to be in this situation and what outcomes do I hope? You can blow up and have people walk out frustrated in tears. Is that what you want? I think conflict is inevitable. Sisters, do not be upset by conflict. It's part of life. And so expect it and be able to try to be better at managing conflict versus avoiding it. Express your feelings constructively. We already said that. You share your thoughts and feelings with clarity and calmness. I think it's important to say what might the other person be feeling or needing, and that's always bringing empathy into the picture. Is there more information I need before responding? So remember, reactions can look very differently depending on the person. Some people fight, so we'll see anger and aggression. Some people flee, they leave, they may be sitting right in front of you, but they've disengaged. We're using a new word. Some people fray, F-R-A-Y, which means they begin to make nice, calm the waters, sort of get everybody okay. And when those don't work, we move to the freeze, just absolutely disconnecting from our emotional life. Freezing says much bigger impact. Sisters, we want to be like this, operating it with our emotional life, not like this, not running away. So reactions, understanding them becomes really important. Now, I want to give you a story about how you might respond to another person's reactivity. And I'm going to talk about Sister Anne. Sister Anne lived in a local community and where the sisters did their own cooking. They also did their own shopping. And when the sisters came home from shopping, they were helping putting away what they had purchased. And one of the part of what they had purchased was some chicken cut up in pieces. And when Anne saw the chicken, the packet, all of the pieces cut up, she blew up and she said to them, "How could you be so stupid to buy this room?" So we now have a reaction from Anne and a fight reaction, and then leave. What happened? Not be about chicken, it's about something else. It's about something else.
Lynn, sorry, you are breaking up.
The first thing we need to do is connect physically and emotionally.
Lynn, can you hear me?
You with your calm self, you're like this. And so the trigger, often unexpressed.
Lynn, we are not able to follow you. You are breaking up. Can you hear me?
Out of her anger. You're not trying to say, hey, this is not rational. We have plenty of food. You're not trying to talk. You're sitting and you're trying to say, so you might say to Anne, you might use the word reaction. I sense you're really angry. Notice, connect, helping her. Can you help?
Lynn, can you hear me?
Can you help me understand?
Lynn, can you hear me, please?
Can you?
Lynn?
Notice, you might say, I sense that. Are you talking to me, Paula?
Yes, Lynn.
No.
Sorry, it's because there is some problem. You are breaking up, so we were not able to follow Sister Anne's happening. So we just got bits. So I don't know if it's your internet or something, but you're breaking up, so it's not
We just
easy.
what?
You're breaking up. Your internet.
I'm breaking up.
The internet is not working. I don't know exactly what's happening.
Okay. Huh. Any better?
I think now you better. So I would ask you please to repeat Sister Anne's story. We just understood that some chicken was bought and then we
Yeah.
lost you.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
So you need to repeat. Thank you.
All right. No, I'm glad you said. So the chicken was purchased by one of the sisters, and we have an incredible reaction from Sister Anne saying, accusing the sisters of being stupid. How could they purchase this kind of chicken? And it left the shoppers kind of like, what? What's this about? And so what do you do? How do you respond? When we go to our head, we say, you want to say to Anne, you want to use your upstairs brain, and you want to say to her, Anne, we have plenty of food. There's plenty of chicken, or talk to us. We sort of get upset because you were the purchaser. What do you mean there's something wrong here? We get defensive. But really, you want to connect physically and emotionally with her. And so you might say, Anne, something like, you're really upset. I want to understand how the purchasing the chicken was so difficult for you. So you're trying to get at her experience, her feelings. Could you help? A wonderful sentence. Could you help me understand your reaction? You can use the word reaction because that's what it is. But notice, kind, caring, compassionate, not angry. Me to her. I might say, you seemed afraid. Maybe, I might try to identify a feeling, but I might just leave it more open-ended. So helping Anne feel what she feels, which we learn is fear, because with a little bit of conversation, when I asked her, help me understand, she said a very straightforward, very quick answer. There will not be enough. And so you say to her, because it's all about connecting, not about changing. And in your past, did you not have enough food? Were there times? And if Anne can tell you that growing up, she went to bed hungry some nights, and even in the early days of her religious life, she was an elderly sister. In the early days of her religious life, working all day, teaching all day, coming home to have a very, very simple and inadequate supper. She went to bed hungry again. Can you understand her reaction? She said, there won't be enough. Somebody's going to get a piece of the chicken with no meat on it. There won't be enough with all this energy, she's telling us. If we can meet her and engage her at that level, letting her feelings flow, not get stuck, by being an empathic and compassionate listener, being with, staying with. And then once you've named and affirmed, oh, I understand, oh, and those feelings, then you have the opportunity to reason, to bring her to the current reality that we are not a community that does not have enough. We have enough. We have enough. She'll be okay. And then also, we can say to her, how can you ask the community to be with you in a better way? And so it could be something like, it sounds like you were really afraid that there wouldn't be enough to eat again. And notice again, because it's out of the past that she's living. There's another little phrase, if you name it, you can tame it. You cannot let fear take over. And now logic and reason can come into play. What do you want your local community to understand about you and about not enough? And is there something you'd like to ask your local community? By the way, this is a true story. And what the local community did in response is choose to buy not a cut up chicken, but chicken breasts. So there was enough for everyone. So sisters, how do you respond to a reactivity or reaction? Connect, 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 stay calm, connect. You might even put your hand on her arm, physically, emotionally. Then you can redirect to the present. But reactions are not in the present. They're about the past. Another way to use 3 R words: relate, relate, relate. You regulate. You stay calm. Don't be, reacting in response. And then you can use reason. And we have enough. And if we want to buy another we can do that. You don't have to be afraid about us and food today. So, what do you think about reacting versus versus responding? What might you have done with Anne? And by the way, you do have another handout connected to this package that talks about responding versus reacting. And in particular, it talks about how it impacts your body: blood pressure, trouble sleeping, heart rate can lead to negative ways of coping. So I'll leave that paper for you. So, what was good for you to hear? What was challenging for you to hear? We have a few minutes for comments. There was a lot to take in on that reacting versus responding. So maybe another way to ask is, what are you taking home with you? What are you taking home?